Hi, everybody, and welcome back to my cult situation report, where I talk about everything that has happened in the world of cults and my world of cults. For the last week, I am Daniella, scholar of cults, extreme groups, and extremely bad leadership, and author of Uncultured, which is a book about growing up in the Children of God religious cult. Before going into the cult of the United States Army, I became Captain Mestyanek in the Army, and you can read all about that. There are signed copies attached to this video that you can find in the links, and you can also buy it anywhere you buy books. It is on audio, and I did it myself. And I haven't been back in 3 weeks, so thanks for still being here, and welcome if you're new. Please don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Let's talk about cults. Okay, so this week, or in the last 3 weeks, my most exciting thing is that I have finished chapter 6 of The Culting of America, which is the book that I'm writing now, where I'm taking my 10-part definition of cult and breaking it down so that I can show it to you in cults, in the US military, and then also in the wider world around us. And chapter 6 was all about step 5, which is isolation. And isolation is certainly not just physical. So I talk about physical isolation, but also mental and psychological isolation. And then I go into all these different types of isolation where, it's easy to understand how cults might isolate you the way I was growing up, which is like a commune somewhere in the world. And you're never really interacting with the world unless you're going out to perform and get money, or, very, very little interaction with the outside world. That's what we think of when we think isolated. We think Jonestown, we think Children of God. But like Nexium is a cult that operated where all their people still appeared to operate in the real world. But you can be so isolated. One of the ways of isolating you is through time, just keeping you so busy. And another one is through finances, keeping you so poor and so dependent on the cult or the group, and also just not having a lot of opportunity to go out and do other things and participate in rounds of life with people outside the cult. A few weeks ago, I talked about how there's this ranking of all the household incomes in America by religious belief, and Jehovah's Witness is dead last. And they are a cult, but they're still considered by a lot of people who do these types of things to be a legitimate religion, even though all the cult scholars agree, by the way, Jehovah's Witnesses, you are a cult. But we can think of Jehovah's Witnesses who are like always either in meetings or knocking on doors, and so all of their time is being dominated by the cult. They're encouraged away from higher education. They're not allowed to join the military, and they can't spend as much time pursuing good careers because they both don't have the education for it, and because all of their time is being taken up by the cult. So another means of isolation. There's all these different things. So that was like a big part of finishing up. And speaking of Culting of America, finishing chapter 6 puts me halfway done, and I have signed a publishing contract. I'm actually going to be self-publishing it so that I can own it and also own the audiobook and do fun stuff on it, like make autographed digital products. Like you'll be able to buy like a cover of the book signed on the back and then download the digital. And that will be kind of fun because a lot of people have asked me to think of a way to do signed audios for Uncultured, and finally did think of the way, but I can't do it for Uncultured because I don't own them, unfortunately. Okay, another big thing that's been going on right now is just the whole P. Diddy situation and the cult of celebrity. What was going on with Cosby and R. Kelly and Epstein and Weinstein, and now it's coming out about P. Diddy. Like, these are sex cults. These are organizations around these people that are procuring sex and often free labor for these leaders at the top. An interesting thing I think about cults that are built around celebrities is you have this sort of automatic us versus them, right? Because the general public is awful. People do want to take advantage of you when you're rich and famous. And so you have this built-in almost persecution complex. You have reasons for needing secrecy, and secrecy in cults is always weaponized. Secrecy is weaponized both to make you feel like you are a special part of the team, right? Like, I know more about America than most of you do because I held a top secret clearance when I was an intelligence officer in the United States Army. And so, like, I feel special, right? That makes you feel special, makes you feel included. It is also, secrecy is also weaponized to hide bad behavior. And secrecy, weaponization of secrets is a very, very important part of cult control. And what goes hand in hand with weaponized secrecy in cults is justified lying. Justifying it to be okay to knowingly lie to outsiders, to them, to the other. And, you know, in the Children of God, this was called, they had a whole doctrine called Deceivers Yet True. You can read about it in my book, which you can get signed copies of at the link. There was also, Rolling Stone published a chapter of Uncultured in their online magazine called According to the Will of God, and it's chapter 3 where they are programming the children, and it's the whole Deceivers Yet True thing. Mormons, I'm told, call this lying for the Lord. Jehovah's Witnesses call it theocratic warfare. A single family cult might call it the circle of trust, or we don't air family's dirty laundry in public. But justified lying. It's okay to lie to outsiders, even though it's never, never okay to lie to us. And lying is a sin. Of course, this is most very, very confusing for the children. I was talking about P. Diddy and the cult of celebrity and the weaponization of secrets and the justified lying and, of course, all of that stuff. And then comes into it, you know, there is racism, there's racial stuff going on, there's stuff about the Black community and homophobia that plays into this. I mean, this even ties back to the history of slaving and buck-breaking in this country. White Woman Whisperer and I, a Black creator who does a podcast with me called Hey White Women, we've talked about this on our show, and you'll see that episode pretty soon as well. So there really is a lot that goes into this. And I think that kind of in general, we have this cult of Hollywood and celebrity, and like every cult, like you look behind the scenes and you see the coercive control, the financial, and the sexual abuse. It just always comes up because cults are about labor and power and controlling people. Then in the last 3 weeks, also Delta Airlines got some coverage because they put out a underwear requirement for their interviewees. So there's literally this, you know, headline that was like, Delta tells people the proper underwear to wear for interviews. And of course, everyone's tagging me in this because, as I've talked about, cults are always about appearance control, right? And cults are always controlling. I feel like appearance control breaks down to 4 things. It'll be hair, body coverage, body size, and underwear. And underwear, including socks and pantyhose, by the way, right? That cults are always controlling. So it's very interesting. We had this whole conversation about underwear and the way that people try so hard to just justify Delta in this. And it basically comes down to they're saying that women can't have visible panty lines in their uniform, right? And like, unless your job is dancing on tables, your organization should not be dictating to you the underwear you wear. And I have been thinking and talking about this for a very long time because when I was writing Uncultured, I put in this detail about how like they told us that girls should not sleep with underwear on because it was gross and we needed to air out, right, all the shaming and then allowing for the abuse. And so because of this, you know, boys and men would, and sometimes women, of course, would check at night to make sure that the girls weren't wearing underwear. And people begged me not to write about the panty checks, fellow survivors. And I was like, no, but I have to, because I know there's something to this, because in the military, there are underwear requirements again, and they're checking our underwear again, and I have this, vibrant image in my head of them very, very much getting very angry because this one woman had brought a red bra with her to basic training and had kept it, and that is absolutely not okay, and we all got smoked for hours, which is how they cause pain to you in the process of breaking you down, because it takes 3 little things to break somebody down: isolation, pain, and small acts of kindness. Nowadays, people like to say the military stopped being physically violent. I'm like, no, they didn't. They just make you cause the violence to yourself. And they call it smoking you, making you work out until you are so exhausted that smoke is literally coming out of your ears. That happened to me, by the way, once. I ate a pepper that was so hot, and it was like the way I chewed it that it went like up back behind my nose and kept burning. And at some point, I literally felt my ears like vent. And I was like, oh, that comes from somewhere. Okay. I did talk about my podcasts, but this week we had discussions about, what did we talk about on the Hey White Woman podcast? I think we were still talking about language. There's been a lot of discussions about language, which is the thing I am moving on to now, because I finished for September, chapter 6 was about isolation. Now moving on to, for November, chapter 7, which is about the jargon jungle, the distinguishable vernacular of cults, and how cults weaponize language. One of the most powerful tools. Margaret Singer, who's writing one of the textbooks about cults, says, in this textbook right here, Cults and Our Myths, says that, there's nothing mysterious about the ways cults control people. It's language and group dynamics. Like, that's it. Which, of course, is part of why I got my master's degree in organizational psychology, because I was like, I want to study group dynamics. Then I realized I was going to be the disorganizational psychologist, because I don't actually care about making groups better, and I don't know that groups want to be better, especially under capitalism and white supremacy and patriarchy. So I'm just here to help individuals understand groups that have hurt them in the past, groups that are hurting them now, and groups that might hurt them in the future. And of course, knit a lot and write books. Ooh, at the end, I'm going to show you my big project that I'm working on now with my love bomb collars. Okay, going back to this concept of us versus them, but for marginalized groups, right? So I get asked a lot, is LGBTQ a cult? And that is, by the way, language that comes to us straight from white nationalism, the same people that gave you the concept of white genocide and reverse racism and the coming race war and all this BS, who literally own and run Stormfront, the super white supremacist website, right? Like, they are the ones that seeded this concept and this language into the national conversation. So just know, if you're hanging out in a lot of places where you're hearing LGBTQ as a cult, this came directly from hate groups. But people will say, well, there is can be this kind of us versus them thing. So here's the thing. When you have marginalized communities, when you have people with very real problems, the reason that cults pop up in times of social turmoil most strongly in the first place is because anywhere you have people with real problems, you also have people that are going to show up to manipulate them. Just similarly to anywhere you have kids, you're going to have abusers, right? So you have to be really, really careful. And I was talking to someone from Nation of Islam, which is a all-black cult that started in the 1930s, American cult, and, it was so interesting seeing how it's they use us versus them, just like every cult does, but, it almost, makes more sense or feels more valid to their people because there is a real problem. White America does hate Black America and, all of these horrible things. It is true, but it is also a tool that is used to manipulate people in these under-resourced and underprivileged demographics, for sure, right? So just another thing, very interesting, something that I have been keenly aware of ever since I got my book deal was I get to tell my story as a Major Macmillan book because I am a white woman, and therefore my book is seen to be the every woman, the universal, the like, this is the face of the cult memoir writer, is very, very Lily White tends to be. And I keep saying we definitely need more. I really want a black cult survivor to write a book called It's Not Black and White, or something of that effect. But like, when I'm talking to this Nation of Islam survivor, I talk to someone who is a Hasidic Judaism survivor, and it's like, we really need more of these kinds of cult memoirs in the national, book list, books that get attention, because once again, like, cults are ultimately always the same. And so you can see these patterns and you can recognize these patterns. And that's the whole reason to do this, in my opinion, is just to help people recognize these things more. Recognize them better and faster and sooner so that you can be more in control of your life all the time. So yeah, LGBTQIA identity, definitely not a cult. Identity cannot be a cult. Just like a verb can't be a cult. Drinking is not a cult, AA. A cult has to be a group, right? This is the same thing I say for religions. Religions are ideas. They give you a world view. They are worldviews, I mean. Cults give you a worldview, but cults have to be a group. So we can't compare ideas and language and groups. They're completely different, apples and oranges, right? Now, if you want to argue all religious organizations are cults, you might have something there. Okay, I am going to be going to Philly in November, on November 7th to be exact. I'm giving a talk at Jefferson University, ironically, on cults in a class that is on conspiracy theories. So very interesting, and hopefully I will write that talk soon. It's going to be a roundtable, so it's going to be more of a discussion, though. I've been told that anyone that wants can come to the talk as well, and so I'll be putting out more information about that. But as of now, we're going to be having a pop-up cult happy hour at the Hilton Garden Inn in downtown Philly starting at 5 p.m. on November 7th. So be there if you're around, or come drive in if you're, I'm driving up from DC that day, so really can be from anywhere around if you want to come have cult pop-up happy hour. I like to do this whenever I travel. I will also be in New York sometime around the holidays because my host daughter is coming from Brazil. She was an exchange student that we had when she was 16 and my kid was 1, and she came and lived with us for 5 months, and we had a really, really amazing experience with her, and we love her to death. And she is now halfway through medical school in Brazil, which is like a 7-year thing that they do, instead of like college separate. And anyways, she worked a deal on her end so she could get time off to come be with us for Christmas and the holidays. And so we will also be taking her up to New York because dream for anyone from Brazil, really. So we'll probably have some kind of little happy hour there, see who's around, wants to come out and have fun. But stay tuned. If you do live in the DC area, I do a monthly cult happy hour, and that is on the second Thursday of every month from 3 to 7. It is in College Park, Maryland, which I know is not very centrally located, but if we get more people and grow and it's necessary, we will change it to a different location. But if you are interested in that, the best thing to do is find me on some other form of social media and tell me you're local, and I will send you the details for that. Right now, I'm doing a project to create content for my Patreon and also for here on YouTube. So I'm reading this book aloud, Beyond Beliefs, The Secret Lives of Women in Extreme Religions, and posting it. So that is something you can get if you subscribe to my Patreon. And now let me tell you a bit about my Patreon, because we are back in the beginning of book club season, and book clubs I'm doing this year mostly through my Patreon, although there will be a link here if you want to purchase the whole subscription. So I have 2 book clubs now. One is the Cult Memoir Book Club, where we read 12 cult books in 12 months and look at the trends and deconstruct and all of that stuff. That's a book club. I just finished our first year of it. It was so wonderful, and it was so I think, impressive to people who are all used to having their cult story or their story of extreme coercive control kind of like make them pretty unique, to then be in a group of like 20 people who all have like a similar story in one way or another, or trying to understand the same thing. It's pretty cool. So a couple ways you can do that. I do have a Patreon where I post some of my premium content, including Un-American, a second book that I wrote to follow Uncultured after I found out the military wanted me to testify against my ex-husband for something really bad so that they could kick him out for it. And it was something that changed everything about how I understood my life. And I was like, oh, I'm going to have to write a whole second memoir looking at cult stories and military stories. But instead of looking at the groups around me, I need to be looking inwardly at power and privilege and whiteness and otherness and what it means to be an American. So I did that, but the book hasn't been published yet. But I did a 6-hour video book of me reading it and knitting, and that is available on my Patreon. If you're a member, you get to watch it for free. Otherwise, you can also just buy it in my shop. So if you loved Uncultured, definitely check that out. So my Patreon, you get your normal subscription and you get all of your content, and then there is a $10 per subscription, which makes it the same as just subscribing to the book club outright. And that lets you drop into either book club. So the second book club was asked for by people who'd been in the first book club, but you don't have to have done the memoir book club to be in the cult theory book club. And if you are a Patreon cult book club subscriber at that level, you will get access to both. And in Cult Theory Book Club, we are going to be reading 4 books over the course of a year, but meeting monthly, but working on like 1 book per quarter. And we're starting with Cults in Our Midst by Singer and Lalich. And then we're going on to Take Back Your Life by Dr. Yanya Lalich. Then to Love, Terror, and Brainwashing by Dr. Alexandra Stein. And then to The Sociopath Next Door by Martha Stout, I believe. And so that starts next week. So on the second Wednesday of the month from 6:30 to 8 EST. It's virtual, of course. And we are starting with Uncultured. You also get a free copy of Uncultured when you subscribe to the Patreon at the book club level, or to the book club, and I should mention a free digital copy of Uncultured and the book list, everything that we're reading. It's going to be super fun. So come check us out. And we're starting next Wednesday with discussing Uncultured. And the links to all of that can be found in my description, including if you just want to subscribe to one or the other of the podcasts and you just know you're going to make that and you don't want to be on the Patreon. But I post a bunch of stuff on the Patreon. It's a fun place to be. And what else? I'm doing live shows on my TikTok now once a week that I'm calling Real Live Cults. Today I talked to someone from the Amish community who's also here on YouTube at Misfit Amish. And she's written a book, Misfit Amish. And she was also, grew up Amish, which is a cult, and then was in the military like me. So we definitely have a lot in common. We had a really interesting conversation about the Amish and, of course, why it does qualify as a cult. And it has all of the same labor and abuses that we find in all of the cults. Another thing, definitely a downer, but that I've talked about a bit this week is suicide, and how this is one of the things that we always see when it comes to cults. It doesn't even matter what type of cult it is. It can be corporate, it can be religious, it can be whatever, but human beings do not survive coercive control and complete oppression if it just goes on and on and on. And so one of the things we see a lot when we are looking at cult-like groups is the suicides. And I definitely wrote about that when I was writing about Zappos for the isolation chapter. Yes, Zappos of the shoe store. Otherwise, that was pretty much it for me. Kind of short. Didn't take the greatest notes. Things have been a bit crazy, but trying to get this book written, trying to keep making a lot of content. So definitely come check me out on all of the social media. I'm like, oh, there was stuff about Cult of Trump, and it was just the debate. One thing I want to talk about, people have asked me, how could I support Kamala since I'm so much on the left, and like her stance on all of these different things. And, there's 2 really interesting things I think people should consider. One is whatever you think you know about international politics and America's relations internationally, you don't know. And politicians can't tell you. Most of what they know, they've learned under secret clearances, and they cannot talk about it. I know this because I am a former intelligence officer in the United States Army. Like, there's stuff I can't even talk about, much less Kamala. But one thing that does give me a lot of hope is that every time I have seen her speak, and also all over her book, she's constantly bringing up the rights of children. And children are definitely the most oppressed demographic in this country. And nobody wants to give children rights, and nobody wants to fight for them. And we never see religious leaders or politicians talking about the rights of children because children can't vote. But one thing about cults is that cults end when they fail to recruit or keep the next generation. So politician talking about children and the rights of children, to me, is an indication that I think she's going to do the right thing in a lot of places as much as she can. While, of course, she's still inside, right, like the cultiness of American politics, and she has to operate within that. And then secondly is like, there's all this like argument in the debate about like, oh, she's done this, she hasn't done this, she hasn't done this, she hasn't done this. Like, y'all, first of all, the way people talk about Kamala, like, we've never talked about the white straight male vice presidents this way. Like, oh, what have they done? Your job as the vice president is to be the president of the Senate and to not just die. To just be there waiting in case the president does just die. Like, it's not her administration. She has no say in international violence and politics, any of that stuff. If we don't know what a Kamala administration is going to be like, and there's just so much rhetoric like we do. So I just wanted to talk about that, but also to say I'm really, really excited because the cult of the military, and one of my big things, one of the themes of my book is grape culture in the military. And they've been saying for a long, long time that they can't do anything about it. And it's like, high control groups can control behavior. That's what they do. So this is relevant to sexual abuse in all of these high control groups. But on a military installation, nobody walks on the grass because it's not allowed. And it is policed by everybody else. They will say, how dare you walk on the sergeant major's grass? Well, you know what? I'm very excited to have a woman commander-in-chief and a sergeant major of the country, because suddenly I think they're going to want to change rape culture, and they're going to do it really, really quickly. It's going to be fascinating to watch, and it's gosh darn about times. And now, let me show you my cool new crochet project. So usually I show everything that I finished. I say now for some nitpicking. But most of the stuff I finished, I had to send off because I'm selling stuff at a nice little clip now. However, first I'll show you some of my collars. I call these the Descent collars. I'm actually putting all of these up for sale through my TikTok at Knitting Cult Lady. This one we call the Encanto collar. Here's a nice little fluorescent one. The colors are kind of different than what you're seeing. Here's the one with a bunch of fun, crazy yarn. I made a cuff that goes with that. This is one that I put a pendant on, and I've attached like a necklace. I buy just chunks of broken jewelry from eBay, and then I use them to do my things. And while I was eBaying, I found somebody's collection of like 25 heart pendants. So I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to make 25 different collars, and they're going to be the Love Bomb collars and earrings. And so the first one I made was the all black. It's the reason I went looking for a pendant, because I was making this. And Love Bomb earrings. These ones are already sold to my mailman. And then I made this one, the fire collar. It's very fall, very Thanksgiving. And Love Bomb earrings. And this one is available for sale on my TikTok until somebody buys one, and then it won't be. And that's kind of my project that I'm working on. And we will finish with a big project that I just finished, and it's amazing.